This is Creative Banter, a creativity and philosophy-focused podcast hosted by Cody Schultz and Ben Horn. As my student teaching kicks off, we spend the first few minutes of the episode discussing how the beginning of that journey has been, before transitioning to our usual discussions around photography. Primarily, we reflect on how different the curriculum is compared to both what Ben and I experienced while in grade school. And speaking of different, Ben has finally developed his black and white film from back in August of 2022, using the Jobo processor he received from a follower. Something that has been on my mind for a bit has been whether I should acquire a camera for documentary photography of my life and the trips I take. Finally, I believe I have landed on the camera, though it brings with it many questions, particularly regarding my upcoming trip to Colorado in the summer. Let's dive right into it, shall we? Okay, so this week started up my student teaching, and I'm tired, Ben. So tired.
I imagine, because that's a major shift in your schedule.
Yeah, I went from waking up around like 8 o'clock every morning to now having to wake up around like 5. And I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been waking up at 5. I should be. I've been waking up around like 5:30 or so, sitting in bed on my phone for like a half hour, which I shouldn't be doing because, screen time.
Yeah.
And then getting out of bed at 6, rushing around quick, getting everything ready, which doesn't take me long because I don't eat until like 11 or so. So that's not a big deal. It's not like I have to rush around and make breakfast or anything, but still, I get out of bed, do my little routine, out the door, and it's gonna take a while for my body to get used to everything.
Yeah, is it kind of, I know you're just getting going with it, but is it along the lines of what you were thinking it would be so far, or is it different, or what's your experience so far?
It's not as nerve-wracking as I thought it would be, but at the same time, I'm also not in front of the classroom like a ton. I've kind of just been observing. I mean, so today, as we're recording this, is my second day that I've been there, which is kind of weird because I started on Tuesday. But I don't know if I'd consider it lucky, but a snow day yesterday. So I had off yesterday. So my second day of student teaching, I had off, which is just like, okay. So they do these flex days. So they call them emergency flex days, and it counts as an instructional day. So it doesn't count as a snow day or anything. They don't have to add it off or take anything away. And but essentially my co-op texted me in the morning, and he's like, hey, like, you really don't have to do anything today. He doesn't believe in busy work, and so he just kind of had them sign in with something and told them go make snow angels or whatever. even though it wasn't until like 12 o'clock that we got maybe 2 inches of snow. And then at night, by the time that I woke up this morning, it was gone because it transitioned right over to rain, and just everything was gone. So there's like, looking out at the lawn in front of me, there's little piles that are left, but other than that, it's so not even worth a snow day. I just kind of sat around, edited the last week's episode that we recorded, and
Well, in some ways, I mean, in terms of going there for a day, then having a little bit of a kind of a break away from it, where it's kind of gives you that initial exposure. You could probably formulate your thoughts a little bit, kind of think about the experience a little bit before being plunged back into it again. So in some ways I can see how that could be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not complaining about it, obviously, but it was one of those things of at that point, I was already up at like 5:30. I got the
Yeah.
email. I'm like, do I go back to bed? Do I not? Because I wasn't sure. He hadn't texted me right away. I got the email from the school, and I got an email from him that gave me his number, and I wasn't sure exactly what the procedure was for that. So
Oh,
when
yeah.
I woke up, I didn't have any direction from him. Like, is there anything that we have to do? Is this like a normal class day, but we're on Zoom instead,
Yeah.
or any of that kind of thing? And so by the time that I got that email from him and further instruction, it was kind of like, I'm already up. Like, all right, guess I'm not doing anything. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm not going back to bed at least.
Yeah. That'd be tough at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And then plus then you mess up what would have been today's sleep schedule. Because now if I would have gone back to bed, slept in further, I would have stayed up later and it would have been restarting completely. So at least now I can kind of keep on a path. But yeah, it's been quiet experience because today was actually the first day that I saw true instruction.
Mm-hmm.
So how he splits up his classes is Tuesdays and Fridays are their reading days, and the entire period, that's all that the kids do. That's their work for the day, is to just sit and read. And the idea is to get each student has to read at least one book per marking period.
And how long is that?
It's there's 4 marking periods to a school year, so
Okay.
maybe like 2 months, 2.5 months, something like that.
Yeah.
So plenty of time to read a book.
Yeah.
So how he does it is you read a book, and then at the end of it, he gives you a little like 5-question test that has questions to it that you can only answer if you've read the book. And he personally has read all the books from his library that you get to choose from, which
Mm-hmm. So he
takes
knows
up
them.
right
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. This library takes up like the entire corner of the room. It's quite extensive.
So it's literally like the students are literally pulling books from his own personal library to read.
Essentially, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're all books that he's bought. I think like every few weeks he'll buy like 5 or 10 more books, set them aside. He'll read through them, and then he'll add them to the library for the kids to choose from. I mean, topics span all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You have books that are very easy reads. You can read in a day very quickly. And then you have books that talk about like suicide and true crime. Fight Club is in there.
Some deeper stuff. Yeah.
Some deeper, more adult stuff. I mean, they're 10th graders, but he will, if they come up to him and they're like, hey, can you help me pick out a book? He knows them at this point well enough that he can help them pick out a book that matches their maturity and their interests. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah.
But with this quiz then that they get, you have to get at least 4 right, and you get up to 100 points, which is massive. Like it can change your grade. It can boost your grade up to two levels, which is like huge. So you can go from a C to an A very quickly just from doing this.
Yeah.
And there's no limit. There's no limit to how many books you can read each marking period and how many quizzes you can take. So you could essentially pass a class just from doing these readings.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating.
Not that these kids didn't necessarily take hold of that and really run with it, but still, it's like you said, it's a fascinating way of doing things.
Yeah, I never had any teachers that did anything like that when I was going to school, and I've also seen how these days with a lot of there's a lot of teachers who'll kind of reverse things where they're basically doing homework in class, and then watching lectures and stuff when they're at home and kind of doing stuff like that. Which what you were saying in terms of having like the reading days kind of reminded me of a little bit in some ways. So it's a fascinating approach to teaching.
Yeah, everything about this is so drastically different from how I was taught in high school.
Yeah, and it sounds like he has a good like it sounds based on that the students are embracing that, and he has like a strong following with them based on what you've said.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow will be the first day that I see it, like, because so Tuesday when I was there, it was obviously a reading day like that, but it wasn't as structured of one because it was the end of the marking period. So he had a firm cutoff date. The books of previous work, whatever, had to be in by 3 o'clock by the end of the school day in order
Hmm.
for it to count. So he was kind of letting the kids use the period as a free time. Either you could finish up a book and do a test, or you could do some of the previous activities within a certain time frame to get those points back and everything.
Hmm.
So tomorrow is going to be the first day that I actually see them sitting down and them read. And
Mm.
having seen how some of them are today, and he even mentioned this outrightly, it's going to be very weird to see them go from how they were today to reading silently, like calm down, not talking over each other, and that kind of deal. Not being regular
Yeah.
10th graders, but actually being like treated like adults of, okay, this is your time now, sit down, use it properly, read this book that you had chosen. And it's not like you have to stick with the book either. There were a couple kids that were talking on Tuesday about books that they had tried reading, they had picked up, tried reading it, and it just didn't work out.
Hmm.
And they got a few pages in and it just switched to a different book. So it's not like you're locked into that book where you have to try and finish it. So
Yeah.
yeah, totally different way of teaching than what I am used to. Totally different way of learning, but so far it's good.
Cool.
I'll start. I guess tomorrow we're doing a couple rounds of 2 truths and a lie, which is always so much fun to make. I hate making them so bad, but he had me do like three rounds of them, and so
Yeah.
we're going to be doing those tomorrow after, like, towards the end of the period, and he doesn't know the answers, so he's going to be a part of it too. So
Yeah.
that'll be like my first true introduction where
Yeah.
I'm less of the mythical creature.
Less lurking in the back in the shadows and more
Yeah,
of,
pretty much.
you know,
Yeah.
getting out on the stage. Yeah. Well, that's
Yes.
cool. They'll be interesting to see how that all evolves. And I'm sure there'll be some things from seeing his teaching style and how that is being embraced by the students that will perhaps transcend to other things and perhaps have other influences on you, with, other work that you do, whether it's through, teaching stuff, writing stuff along those lines. So I think it'll be a very fascinating experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how things go tomorrow after I start to introduce my voice to the class more. I think on Monday it's going to start to pick up where I start to like do a little bit of co-teaching here and there, a little banter back and forth between him and I. Um,
Yeah.
he's very easygoing when it comes to that kind of thing, which is great. He's not like trying to rush me into anything, but he is also encouraging me, which he rightfully should be, to get in front of the class more, to start interacting with the kids and everything instead of just sitting and observing like I have been the past 2 days that I was there.
Yeah.
Especially because at some point I'm going to have to be teaching these kids lessons and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's a very lax environment, but overall,
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool.
Very cool. Now, speaking of teaching and stuff, I've been starting teaching myself to do some black and white.
Oh,
So
finally.
I had mentioned, and we discussed a few episodes back or whenever it was, that I had been gifted a Jobo film processing setup, and I had mentioned that everything was working on it. So I went ahead and I had ordered the drum for it to put the film in, and I had a series of photos from when I went up to the bristle cones. This was back in August. All shot on black and white film,
Right.
and
Yeah, I
I
remember
hadn't
that.
developed it. Yeah, it was just sitting around, and so I decided, this will be a good batch to run through it. I'm not particularly they're just kind of spur of the moment photos. They're not ones where like I'm expecting greatness from it, where I'm perfectly fine using them just as an experiment, really.
Yeah.
And so I had 5 sheets of film, but I kind of no, I had 4 sheets of film. Um, but for whatever reason, I miscounted and I put uh, all but one of them. So I put 3 of them inside this drum, which you have to do inside this film changing tent,
Hmm.
and then I put the lid on the drum. And then before I was closing up the thing of film, I'm like, oh no, there's one more sheet in there. But for those, and I don't know how much experience you have in terms of knowing about how the Jobo stuff works, and I'm sure most of the people listening have no clue, but so the drum has a lid that goes on. It doesn't screw on, it just pushes on with friction. And when it goes on there, it goes on there. Like once it's on, the only way to really get it off is like with air pressure.
Okay.
Um so I put it on there. I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing 3 of the 4 sheets of film in this run. And so I processed it, and not to get into any of the technical stuff, but I had read that it's good when doing the rotary processing to pre-wash it by putting some water through it first for 5 minutes and letting it tumble around before doing the developer.
It's supposed to take off the anti-halation layer to it
Yeah.
or something like that, I think.
And then when you dump it, it looks like there's like this like ink coming out
Yeah, yeah,
when you
you get
dump
some
that
pretty
cycle.
colors. You get some nice pretty
Yeah.
colors depending on it. But I don't think it's necessary with Ilford films. Um,
Yeah.
I don't
They and
typically
they
do
they
it,
were actually
but
recommending against it because they said it can lead to uneven processing, which is
yeah.
exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think I have
Um,
more issues when I do try and rinse the film prior than if I
mhm.
don't. So, yeah.
Yeah, so like around the edges, it was like a little overdeveloped, and there was like some unevenness. But again, it was just these were just test photos for me to try it. So then I went around, I took a few more photos just in my backyard and combined that with the other sheet that I hadn't processed yet. And then I developed it. And then this time I cut the development time and I didn't do the pre wash. And they actually turned out pretty darn good. Um, though I think I'll need to go to use a different developer that allows me to have a longer development time, um, because the one I was using, it got a bit too contrasty, and so the highlights started getting a bit too bright. So, um, and again, without getting all the technical stuff, which is one of the reasons why I avoided black and white to begin with, because it's nothing like if you have a simple question, like say, oh, what should I do for this? And if you search for that question on Google, it pulls up a forum. It's herding cats. Every single person has a completely different, contradictory
Yep.
solution, and my eyes just glaze over at a certain point. I'm like, I'm reading none of this. Um,
You said you were
so I
using
think
Ilfotech for your developer?
it was Ilfosol 3.
Right, Ilfosol.
Um,
Okay.
and so I'm gonna try using the Ilfotech. You're probably gonna hear my dog barking here pretty soon. I see a FedEx delivery out front. He loves a FedEx guy. But I was gonna try that, and I also heard the Kodak one, X tall, I think it is. I've heard good stuff about. So I'll need to do some experimenting over the next bit of time before I put some film through it that I really feel very good about, that I don't really want to mess up. But I think it'll take a little while to get a hang of that. But it does remind me a lot of when I was first getting into color, um, because it's a matter of taking a photo and then seeing how it turns out and not really knowing how it's going to turn out. And there's so much learning around every corner. But there was one photo I took. It was just of my Forerunner in my garage, so nothing special. Um, but I could already see that it had. There goes Oliver in the background. Uh, he's letting me know that the evil FedEx guy's here. Uh, but yeah, so actually, no, I don't have to sign for this one. I was just making sure. It's a filter that I had ordered, so it's not
Gotcha.
exactly high dollar item. But yeah, it does remind me a lot of when I was first starting with color, because everything is new, everything's different. But that one black and white photo of my Forerunner just sitting in the garage, it was pretty cool how it has a very luminous look to it,
Hmm.
where it looks like the image is glowing from within. And I realize, yes, I'm looking at a scan of it on my computer monitor, so it literally is glowing from within. But there is something different about the tonality, and I do look forward to taking black and white more seriously now that I'll have um, a very repeatable way of consistently processing the film, where once I figure out what the particular formula is that gives me the look that I like, I think it'll be fun. And also, I should mention that working with the Jobo, it's very therapeutic, because you just have this drum that's spinning there. It's in this water bath. There's like a water pump, so there's kind of water trickling through the unit. So it's like this like meditation fountain with the rhythmic sound of the motor kind of doing its thing and whirring around. And so it was actually a very enjoyable process. Um, and it made me feel a little bit like I was on Breaking Bad, just a little bit, but not to the full extent. Um, but I do look forward to doing a bit more of that, and I think I'm going to actually try to take some um, more serious attempts at exposing some black and white film on my upcoming trip to Death Valley, so that I'll have some material to work with and get familiar with it all.
Yeah, I know it's going to take a while for that, but I definitely think it's going to be worth it especially depending on what you get from Death Valley. For me, it's taken, we're going back almost 6 years since I started playing with film. So it's taken about that time for me to start getting used to different developers, to try different things.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
and I
pretty
think some of
happy.
it's a matter of, like, I'll see the image, and I know that there's certain parts about it that aren't quite like how I want them to be, because I already have a feeling for what I would like it to be, and then it's a matter of looking for the solution that gets it to be that way. But I do think one of the fun things about this is that it will definitely encourage me to do more local shooting. Um, in some ways, because I just want to see how that scene looks on film, and with the barrier to getting the film developed, I don't have to drive 45 minutes away to a place and then drive back a day later or whatever and not have control over the process. Now I can just set out and develop the film and see how it turns out. So I think it'll be really nice to be able to also do a little bit more local stuff as well once I get the hang of this.
Yeah, that'll definitely help you to better get the hang of it, though, too. So not necessarily to prioritize doing far off stuff like Death Valley, but to maybe
Yeah.
look at taking more photographs in your backyard or the stuff that's around you, because at least that way, even as you're learning, if you do mess something up, you can go back to it and re-photograph
Yeah.
it and try again until you get it right to a point that you are happy with. I know that's something
Exactly.
that I really enjoy about photographing locally, like with those photographs we had talked about with the tilt of the camera and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I had posted on the Discord how the development just didn't work out, whether for one reason or another, I'm not quite exactly sure. Something with it just didn't go quite as planned. And so now I already have plans of, it's 45 minutes away, I'll head back down. Like, it's not a big deal, then I'll develop it again and keep trying it. Like, it's not as big of a deal as if I were to go to, say, Acadia or for you, Death Valley, and
Yeah.
then you're developing at home and all of a sudden you mess something up and you're like, oh, come on. Like,
Yeah.
totally different feeling. But speaking
Yeah.
on photographing locally
Uh-huh.
and trying new things with photography, I had mentioned before about getting a little digital camera, like a Fuji X100V or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, for more of like the documenting everyday life kind of thing.
Yeah.
And while I don't have anything now, so don't get too excited,
Nah.
I do you have plans of getting a little Ricoh GR series camera?
Yeah, I've heard good stuff about those.
Sean Tucker uses one. That's where I've heard it from, and it's very popular among street photographers. It's essentially a little point and shoot with a fixed 28 millimeter equivalent lens. They also have a
Mm-hmm.
40 millimeter equivalent to it. Um, Super sharp images you get out of it. Just overall a solid camera and not too expensive. The problem with the X100V is it's extraordinarily popular right now. So it's almost impossible to get a hold of one. Either on the
Mm-hmm.
used market, they're just crazy expensive, and on like B&H, they're back ordered and have been for like 6 months now. So I think I've landed on the Ricoh.
Mm-hmm.
I plan on getting it come probably April, before my trip to Acadia, which we just have the dates figured out now. End of June we'll be going. And yeah, I'm just trying to figure out whether I want to go with the traditional GR3, which is a 28 millimeter, or whether I get the GR3X, which is a 40 millimeter equivalent. A little bit more expensive, not much though, so not quite
So do,
sure.
do you think you're going to stick with it this time because it has a specific purpose? Or do you think that after a while you may perhaps realize it's not quite what you were thinking? That's always the gamble when getting, especially as a film shooter, even if it has a specific purpose for, like documenting stuff. it- and in sense, well, I guess I mean it's a lot different from what it's certainly way different than shooting with 4x5 and such. But it'll be interesting to see how you work with the camera and how it affects your process and what you shoot.
That's
Um,
kind of why I'm leaning more towards the GR3, the wider angle,
yeah,
because I want further separation from 4x5 with this.
yeah,
And I
because the more
think
different it
this
is, the less that you'll feel it's like in some way impeding on or competing with.
exactly. And I think that's a big reason as to why, like, every camera that I've gotten in the past, including the RB67, I think that's why I've never really connected so strongly with them, because I've always stuck around that 50 millimeter equivalent,
Hmm.
which is what my 4x5 is. And so now I'm faced with the choice of, well, if I'm going to take out a camera, they're the same focal length, roughly at least. So I'm more inclined to take out the 4x5. But with the Ricoh, at least, it's going to have a drastically different purpose. It's pocketable. I mean, the thing is literally the size of your hand, not even. And
Hmm.
and I was also thinking with it, and I don't know how to feel, but with this trip to Colorado, I was thinking of leaving the 4x5 behind
Hmm.
and just taking out the Ricoh. And yeah, I'm not sure how to feel on that. Like I'm trying to think it through as I'm speaking now to you, and I was thinking about it last night because that's when it like popped up in my head.
Hmm.
But to prioritize the time spent with my dad out there the first time seeing it, instead of having to worry about being overwhelmed of setting up and taking shots, like I could see it being making the trip more enjoyable that way, and just coming back and documenting the trip in like the form of an ebook or something, and just keeping it as that's the form. I have
Hmm.
a couple different ideas around that, but I'm not sure whether the 4x5 will come with me to Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, with that, it involves a different sort of mentality. In that sense, I mean, I don't see the work shot with a 4x5, competing what you'd be shooting with that. It does bring to mind there was a question on one of my older YouTube videos from a few years ago, and I was sharing the photos that I shot digitally. It was during the winter of 2021 when I went to Zion and there was snow, And so I brought along a digital kit and I shot the photos. And on that particular trip, that camera that I was working with for the digital, it was a Sony full frame. It was in a way competing with the large format because I was approaching the subject the same way, shooting the same sort of subjects, same sort of light and that sort of thing. And I did not really embrace the process of working with digital, and I didn't really feel a connection with the work that I'd captured with it. But again, it was kind of competing with it. But the question that was asked in the comments was, and I don't have it in front of me, but the person was saying something along the lines of, "I'd be fascinated if you would go on a trip with the digital, and so that you could pinpoint at what part of the process it is that it just doesn't really work." Because he says, you could slow down with a digital camera the same way with you do a large format. You can shoot less in the same way, but at what point does it fall short of having the connection with those images? And I was thinking about it, and for me, it's at the very start of the process, because with the film setup, I feel like I'm capturing an image that's timeless, and I will never feel that way with digital. So from the very get-go, that has a different feel to it with film than for digital for doing like the landscape stuff. But in your case, you're going to be using that to take pictures of going out there, and you and your dad and all the experiences that you have and everything. And in that sense, the pictures that you'll be shooting with the Ricoh would be timeless from the very beginning,
Yeah.
because you would never have those pictures on the 4x5.
Right.
So I think I can definitely see how having the small camera would be nice. You will find stuff, if you don't have the 4x5, you will find amazing subjects, things where the light is perfect, the conditions are perfect, and you will say, "I wish I had my camera right now. I have all day to shoot this. It's absolutely perfect." That is absolutely guaranteed to happen. So it'd be a good way of seeing good stuff if you don't bring the 4x5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my only worry. But it's one of those things where not bringing it could be just as beneficial as bringing it. And I'm not quite sure where that line is drawn between
Yeah.
the advantage versus disadvantage. Like, I know that I'm going out with my dad, so regardless whether we're going on a hike or whatever we're doing, he knows how much photography means to me and
Hmm.
how much I enjoy the process of my 4x5 and all of that. So I know that in terms of if I say, oh, I want to stop here for a half hour, an hour, and take this photograph while we're doing whatever, he's going to have no issue with that. Even if we're out on a ride and I want to pull off onto the side of the road and take out my camera and do my thing, he's not going to
Hmm.
have any kind of issue with it. So I know that's not really any any deterrent from bringing it. But I just wonder what it would be like to not have my camera, my true camera, for that long of a time. Because we're going to be out there for like 2 weeks. So it's a brand new area
Yeah.
for that long to not have any like true photography being done. Because like I said, these digital photographs, I wouldn't do anything with them besides throw them into an ebook, maybe do a physical book, a little monograph like from that's printed from Blurb or whatever, um, just for my dad and I to have. But other than that, I have no idea.
Are you going to be like staying in particular places for many days at a time, or is it going to be from one place to another kind of a thing?
We're just gonna be staying at one place the whole time.
See, for that, if I was staying in one place the whole time, I would probably want to have it, because there will be times when you can just like kind of wander off and find some interesting stuff to shoot.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
downtime. In that situation, I probably would want to have it. But if it was really going from one place to another where it's just not as conducive for that,
yeah,
I think that'd be different. Now, that being said, when my wife and I were in Maui, there was a couple times when there were some pretty good light, some nice foregrounds and stuff. I had zero desire to have the camera with me. So I have no problem shutting that off. Um, and, just iPhone photos were fine.
I definitely am leaning more toward bringing 4x5 just because I don't know if or when I'll ever get back out to Colorado.
Yeah.
I already plan on or hope to be meeting up with like at least 2 or 3 different photographers from out there that I know of, and going on hikes with them for various reasons. But so for those reasons, yeah, to have the 4x5 and to be able to enjoy that process and all of that would definitely be worth it. And given the fact that we're going to be at one place the whole time, not having to worry about bebopping around, it's not that big of a deal where I could just leave the 4x5 behind for a couple of the days.
Yeah. Is it more of a like I'm picturing Colorado, I'm picturing mountains and forests and stuff. Are you kind of off in nature a little bit more, or like what kind of what's the sort of place where you're going to be at?
So looking at Colorado on the map, we're in the southwest corner of it, down by Durango.
Okay, so you're definitely in the mountainous areas.
Yeah, we are. We'll be staying in Lake City, so that's like surrounded by mountains and woodland and all that kind of thing.
You're gonna need to bring the camera.
yeah, I know. As I talk more about it, like
it's just a 4x5. The worst thing is you bring it and not use it. But yeah. I think if you're in one place, if you have time to kind of go off and find, you're gonna find some cool thing, not far from the road, based on conversations we've had in the past, and you're gonna be like, yeah, this is what I need to shoot right now. So yeah. I think you got to bring it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
That just means that I have to figure out my tripod situation too. I might have to pick up a small compact tripod for in my saddlebag to make it a little bit easier on me. But nonetheless, I still plan on getting the Ricoh to do that little ebook or physical book project thing, just documenting stuff. Because I think cool. That will be probably, those will be the most meaningful photographs that I take from that whole trip, regardless whether I bring the 4x5. So,
and speaking of ebooks, I just recently, as of about a little less than a week ago, as of the time that we're recording this, I finally finished a project that was inspired based on our conversations here, and evolved into something a little bit different than what I was thinking. I had mentioned in the past how I was keeping a written journal while I was in Zion, with the idea of pairing those written entries along with pictures I take of the film atop a light box. So they're unedited, they're raw pictures, so I have to adjust the contrast and stuff. I'm trying to match the appearance of the original film as much as possible, not trying to make it look like it's, more cool than it really is. But it was a really interesting experience to go through and to create that. So I call it unpolished, with the idea that it's unpolished thoughts and unpolished images. And it's in response to the fact that everything we see online is so incredibly ultra polished, where images are tweaked to perfection and people present themselves only in the best light. And so I figured this would be an interesting project, and it's something that I can do for every trip, because it shares the thought process behind the images. And also I include some reflections in terms of my exact thought process for the compositions. And at the very end, I have it where you have the facing pages of the ebook, where you have the original film on one side and then the edited version on the other side. And so one was, the original film was a picture I took with my A7S II on the light box, and then the final edit is a scan I did on my Epson. And I had a very interesting experience while I was creating this. And it had me go through and actually re-edit a good chunk of the images, um, because when I created this ebook, it was at the very time when my own memory of how things actually looked was really starting to fade. So I was leaning more heavily on the way that the film looks, and I was became more satisfied with the images when they more closely matched the original film and the experience of seeing that film. So in the process of creating this ebook, I went through and I kind of re-edited the images. And it's interesting because now oftentimes the final portfolio image is a very close match for how the film looks, where initially I was going in a bit more of a different direction with it. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and so I think uh, the goal for this originally was to have this result in a zine, but I'm not sure how that would work, um, because it would be a lot of pages. And um, my initial concern when I was doing the journal entries was to try to keep it to a page, but they're not very big pages. And I find that when I was able to expand the journal entries over 2 pages and perhaps even more, I can really get more descriptive about what I'm seeing, how I'm feeling, and I think that is important stuff. Um, and I could certainly do kind of a best of, some of the work I like the most, and use that in zine form at the end of the year. But it kind
I
of goes
feel like
against the
that
whole
takes away.
unpolished.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes away. It's like listening to one song from an album versus listening to that entire album with the songs in the exact order that they are, where you get greater context from that. So I'm not sure how it's going to result in a zine, um, but I think it's really well suited for the ebook format, because I can make the journal entries really as long as they need to be, and it's easy enough just to add more pages to the ebook. Um, so
Does it
it's been a
have to be a
fascinating
zine
project.
though? Like, do you
Um,
feel as though it has to be like that
well, I
has to
wanted
be its final format? Because I know that you wanted to
I
do
don't think it
that, but
does. And I don't think it has to be. I think my goal was to create a zine, and then this was an idea that could lead me there. But now I'm thinking that this idea doesn't lead me there, but perhaps there's another one where maybe it's just the final work presented in a zine, but then it wouldn't work with the journal entries as much, or I'm not quite sure how that would pan out. Um,
yeah, I don't think that it has to be a zine for this project. I think if anything,
mhm.
a different project can be born for the sake of a zine. But
Yeah,
I don't think there's any reason as to why this can't just live as a finalized ebook and nothing more, because
yeah,
it gives you so much more freedom to do it in this way, where, like you said, you can be more expressive in your writing, you can write more and not feel constrained in any way. Because
yeah.
while we've talked about constraints being able to be very very beneficial in some degrees, in when it comes to this, I think it's detrimental to the overall project.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too is, and I think I'd mentioned this in our past conversations, is when I was in the field, keeping the journal was extremely beneficial for me. Because it would force me to sit still. It would force me to kind of get through my own thoughts. And kind of that way I could avoid the whole first day funk that I normally have when I go on the trips. So I see that as a very important part about the process. And I definitely, as I'm getting things geared up for my annual visit to Death Valley, I am 100% going to produce another one of these, or at least, keep all the journal entries. And I would think it should come together in a very similar way. But in this case, go a little bit longer with the journal entries, because it makes a really interesting piece. I mean, for my own selfish reasons, for me to reflect back on, because the process of putting it together gave me a different perspective and a different view of the work that I created on that trip. And so I see it as a very important part of my own process. And I think so far that's been a very positive reaction to it. People have enjoyed the fact that it's different from the other stuff that's out there. It's not educational for the sake of educational, but there's stuff in it that I think people could perhaps learn from.
Yeah, I think so something that I want to try in a similar vein to this, for my trip to Acadia and especially for my one to Colorado, I'm thinking about trying to do a little pop-up newsletter that would just last the length of the trip, and it would be a way for me to use this Rico, especially in a new way, in conjunction with my 4x5 and with writing down my thoughts. And this all comes from Craig Mod. He does on all of his walks that he does a little pop-up newsletter. It strictly lasts for how long the walk lasts, and then that whole newsletter list, anyone who subscribed to it is deleted, and he doesn't keep any of the emails. It's just gone. Which is a fascinating idea because it gives me a lot of freedom for what I want to do with that. There's no remnants of it left unless I choose for there to be. So the nice thing with this Rico is that it has Wi-Fi capabilities, so I can sync it up to my phone, and Sean Tucker does all of his editing on his phone and then in Lightroom, and then brings it over into his computer or whatever for just organization or whatever. So I figured for Acadia, each day I'd come back after the hikes and everything. Once dinner's done, I'll more than likely have my laptop with me anyway for writing in general. And so why not just whatever photographs, the 5-10 that I took with a Rico that day, throw them over to my phone, edit them quick, and then throw them into a newsletter with, say, 500, 1,000 words or whatever about the day. That way it's kind of doing like this similar journal entry, and then just push that out to whoever wants to see it, even if it's just for myself.
Yeah.
And a way of documenting the trip that I've never tried before. But that gives a lot of creative freedom as well, because I can take all of these emails then, if I want, at the end of it, and put them into some kind of ebook form, and throw that out into the world too if people want to see it. And especially for the Colorado trip, I feel as though that's something that also needs to happen prior to the ebook, so that way I can go through my thoughts, and then once I have all of this collection after the time span written down, I'll be able to go through, parse back through it, and see what needs to be included in the book, what doesn't, and it'll make that final product, if I do turn it into a physical book, even more special, because then it has my own thoughts and feelings towards it implanted in there. So
yeah. Now for when you mentioned, writing your reflections on the day and such, now that's going to be typed out, or are you going to handwrite it and then type it out, or like how would you be doing that?
For the sake of ease with pushing it out to a newsletter, it'll all be typed up. It'll be way too difficult for how I want to do it to handwrite it and then try to figure out a way to bring it into the computer to send out all in one day and keep it like that. But we'll see. But I have the dates set for that. So
now you have a far greater skill set when it comes to writing than I do. So for me, if at the end of each day I had to sit down and type out 500 words or whatever it was, which is not a huge amount, but if I had to do that, I would just get writer's block, and it would not go well. I would not be able to keep up with it. But somehow when it's something I'm handwriting, I could just sit there with the back hatch open in my Forerunner, just sitting there and kind of have some coffee going or whatever, and just write out the whole entry sometimes it's just like a little bit throughout the day that I add to it. But sometimes if it's at the end of the day, I'm just adding to it. It takes me about, 5 minutes maybe, just to write everything out. And I will say that with this approach, it's nice not having any ability to edit anything
Yeah.
after the fact. Once you write it, if I spell something wrong, it is what it is. If I use the wrong word, if I scribble something out, I think that only adds to it. Um, and so when I was putting together the ebook, I just kind of assembly line the scanning of all those pages, and I read through them, and it was because of the whole concept of this. I think the fact that it's unpolished thoughts made it far easier on my end versus when I was writing the captions for the images. Sometimes it would take me an hour to write one of them. Like my brain would just like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What if we change this word with that word and flip things around? Do I need that comma? It just was a complete like a wrench in the process. But you have a far better skill set for writing. So for you, maybe it's as easy for you to type it out as it is for me just to scribble stuff down in a notebook and then throw it in the back of my Forerunner.
I think it also has to do with what you're writing about. Like
That's true.
What I've been more focused on these past few times that I've written, which has been far less than it should be, but that's a whole other topic. It's been much more personal and delving more into my own struggles with mental health and navigating that kind of realm, rather than talking on educational means of photography or connections to photography like that. So I think that definitely helps to alleviate that writer's block, but it doesn't do it entirely. But I think when it comes to something like, oh, I'm just jotting down what happened during a trip and my feelings during this day of that trip, I mean, that's just like writing a journal entry. That's essentially all that you're doing. So I don't think it's nearly as difficult as when you're trying to push something out that A, you know that people are going to read and expect a certain level of quality from you, and B, it doesn't require the research and other prior knowledge that some other stuff would need. Which I think is the great thing about this pop-up newsletter idea, is that if I get even 50 people to sign up for it, 100 people, whatever, they're the only ones that are going to be seeing it. I don't plan on doing any kind of archive to it or public archive on it. And if there's stuff that I want to go back through and edit, I have that ability to do that before I push it out in any truly public manner. So there's a lot less pressure of making things perfect. It is strictly a documentational tool that is providing insight into my trips and into my thinking during those trips, that kind of deal, for those who are interested.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is a very interesting concept, and in many ways it is similar to, in some ways, to kind of the process by which I was doing the unpolished ebook. Yeah, I like that angle on it. That's definitely pretty cool, and I look forward to seeing how that turns out. And also, I think it'll give you a sense of purpose.
Yes,
when you're out
definitely.
there, which is nice. It's nice to have.
Yeah. Plus, it also gives me even greater of a reason to take out this Ricoh and to use this additional camera in supplementation of the 4x5. That otherwise, I'm sure there would be times where it would be one or the other. If I have this this purpose behind it, it's going to help, I think. So
yeah,
we'll see how that goes. But
cool.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. and you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.